Okay, morning. We're here on the final morning of CUPRAP. I'm with Bill Faust and Ken Sejpal. But I'll let you guys introduce yourselves. Who are you? What do you do?
I'm Kin Sejpal. I am the Associate Vice President of Marketing, Brand, and Creative at RIT, which stands for Rochester Institute of Technology in upstate New York.
And I'm Bill Faust. I'm one of the partners at Ologie. And Ologie is a marketing and branding agency that specializes in higher education.
Fantastic. So it's the final morning. We had a full day of conference yesterday. What were some of the highlights for you at the conference? What have you taken away, or what have you seen so far?
For me, I think the session that I really enjoyed yesterday was the Swarthmore session, just because I think brand voice is one of the hardest things to accomplish. And I just think they did an amazing job. And not just, at the place where it's kind of easy, like on the website homepage or the view book cover, they did that. But they drove it down to email. And they took some risks, and it was great. And they got called out, like some alums and some parents bumped on some of the stuff they did. But for the most part, it was like, hey, you're being you, and we appreciate that. So I thought that was great.
Yeah. Go for it.
Oh, I was going to say that's the one session I did not attend, and I wish I did. But I really enjoyed Jeff's lingo.
Yeah.
I mean, he's such a smart, savvy, knowledgeable person that should be talking not just at this conference, but perhaps anywhere we have presidents and trustees and other senior leadership. So between his keynote and some of the afternoon and morning sessions, like Liz Gross talking about social listening and data-driven insights, I think there's just quite a bit to take back and mull over, ponder, and think about how we can do things differently.
Yeah, one of the things with Jeff's keynote that was really interesting was, this idea of getting the marketing team in the room with the senior stakeholders influencing the university, the product, the classes. How are you finding that at RIT? Do you have that voice at that level?
Yeah, in fact, I'm fortunate to say that I work at an institution where the first vice president and CMO position was created by the trustees and essentially to serve on the president's cabinet and to not only work on the promotion P of the marketing aspect that most universities or most organizations look at, but really influence the other P's, especially the product strategy. So at our presentation yesterday, we talked a little bit about how our group worked with academic affairs and admissions to really create this new product category and package and promote it, but the promotion was like the last aspect of it. We did a lot of other strategic work in the marketing area that typically people don't call on marketing for. So I would say I'm lucky in that sense.
That's fantastic. And you presented yesterday. I went to the presentation. It was fantastic. Talk us about the journey, because 2017 that it started, your engagement. Talk us about the early days and the early part of that process in your engagement.
And I actually think it started with you reaching out to me, if I'm not mistaken. We had known each other when Ken was at Purdue, and sort of quickly filled me in on what was going on. New president. They had also just finished a bunch of research that sounded really compelling, and kind of here's what we want to do. And so then I, kind of grabbed my partner and our team and sort of put together okay, here's how we think we would approach it, and then we just sort of dove in. But then over the next 18 months, there was forward momentum, and then there was okay, we have to pause. What's going on here? But I mean, overall, it was just a great process, and it is a school that believes in marketing, and I think that makes all the difference.
Yeah, you spoke about the research, and you had a slide there that was really impressive. And I think the line that you used is, lots of people had a voice but not a vote. But was the research already done, or was that part of the process, when you went out to stakeholders? How did that research come about?
Yeah, we had done a very in-depth research I call it the baseline study, just so that we get a pulse on what's the current understanding of RIT and what does the marketplace think of RIT? What does the internal community think of RIT? So that was a very intensive, in-depth study, both qualitative and quantitative, with 9+ audiences. So all in all, I think between that research and the discovery that Ologie did, and Ologie did some testing as well of some creative ideas and focus groups, etc. Overall, I think we talked to about over 10,000 people.
Yeah,
Was that the number we used? Yeah, and that's true because we had all these councils and committees and board members and prospective students. So very data-driven, to say the least.
Yeah. Were there surprises in the research? Was there anything that stood out? You're like, oh, okay.
A lot of things was validating. A couple of things that I found surprising. Again, I didn't have the institutional knowledge that a lot of other people did. But when I came to RIT, there was a lot of pride in the student body and faculty and staff thinking that and embodying this idea of being geeky and nerdy. That was even in our Twitter description, that RIT is a school for geeks and nerds and artists and things of that sort. And you contrasted that against what the external market wants and is looking for. Those are not the terms.
Yeah.
And so we really had to shift our thinking of keeping true to our personality, but really changing the voice and the language that we use in order to describe ourselves. So there were those types of things. There were other things about just the legacy aspect that we knew was going to play into how we build on RIT's story. But how strong that legacy was and how much people cared about our co-op brand. That's cooperative education, making sure that we didn't completely lose that as we build out this new story. So those are some of the things that come to mind. I don't know, Bill, if you think differently.
One of the things that you mentioned when you start creating that voice, and you said it was really hard, you mentioned Swarthmore, and I think that you had you spoke about alignment, and there was a part where it was the why, the who, the what. Talk me through that, how you start building that voice and how you get that alignment in that part of the process.
Yeah, I mean, I think, to kind of build on what Ken was just saying, I think in discovery, so there was a lot of research done, and really all we had to do was fill in some gaps, right? But I think the biggest gap we needed to fill in was sort of, what's the culture, what's the personality like? And actually, we were drawn to that geekiness, we were drawn to that. It's almost like a pride of being, imperfect, but also really competent and willing to do research and dive deep and tinker and toil and all those kind of things. So I think that's where the voice starts, is really understanding the culture of the place and what kind of vibe, its overall marketing and communication should have. And then I think when you get into strategy, you try to put words on paper to define that. So the personality traits that Ken went through. And one was unusual, right? Unusual,
correct.
And you don't usually describe a brand with unwords to begin with, because people are like, they're negative, But, to say what's our brand? Well, it's unusual. I mean, the fact that nobody at RIT said, we can't say that was great. So then where it really comes together, though, is when you start to explore the creative and our writers start to write headlines and Ken's team starts to react to them. And that's where it really comes together, where we can actually show some ads or video scripts or digital things that have a voice. And it's okay, does that feel like you? And it's either absolutely or not quite, but here's where it should go. So it's an iterative. That was another thing we talked about yesterday. So every step of the way you have to sort of build layers to get to the voice.
Well, you get to that activation, and the slide that you put up, all those logos were those logos that were being used in RIT for different schools, and it was like a collage.
We call it the Battle of the 1,300 Acres of everybody creating their own logos, and really, we are very cognizant of the fact that people didn't do this just because they wanted to be against what the institution was doing. There just wasn't an institutional strategy.
That's a fact.
There just wasn't a cohesive brand architecture that they could follow. So in the absence of having anything, they created something, and that is perfectly understandable. So yes, we went from that whole cacophony to really getting a clean, modern architecture that Ologie helped us develop, and the appetite for getting some of that was great. And that, again, proves the point that people just wanted something, and once we gave them those guidelines, they were happy to get on board.
That's great. And the activation part, Bill, you spoke a part where you got some messaging, but some of the groups were struggling with the personas or how to use it. Talk about then how you reacted and iterated at that moment.
Yeah, and I think it's important to reiterate that, activation sort of became this like octopus.
Yeah.
Where Kin's team was driving a lot of things. She had other agencies working on things. There were internal groups, and so, we were involved in certain things. But the one thing that Kin and others came back to us and said is, in the admissions area, in the enrollment marketing area, we're sort of struggling with how to translate this messaging to the different kinds of students that RIT appeals to. Those geeks and those nerds. Yep. And so we said, well, let's break it down a little bit, because they're not all one. RIT is very diverse, and they have things in common, but what a hardcore engineering type student is looking for and what they think about is going to be different than a fine arts student or a photography student or something like that. So it was just really, we said, give us all your enrollment data. Let's really understand the percentages that end up saying yes here and what characteristics you already know. And then we did some secondary research to kind of augment that. And we just slowly pulled together these kind of descriptions that made it more tangible. This is what a business student kind of thinks about. And then Ken and Ken's team and then the admissions folks just took it and ran with it in terms of, okay, how do we now translate? If you go to the, what are our art majors page on the website, what should that look, feel, and sound like? What should the key messages be? And those personas help sort of filter that.
Yeah, that's great. And the impact then from the whole thing, the slides at the end, the data and the numbers, you must be delighted.
Yeah, I mean, with everything nowadays, marketing too needs to be data driven because resources are finite and the possibilities are endless. So how do you know what you're doing is working? And that's when some of the, the brand health studies come in. So the research that I alluded to in the beginning, we went back out in the field, replicated it to kind of see if we move the needle. So those were some brand performance metrics that we got back, and those are definitely encouraging. Definitely shows that some of the new messages that we developed with the help of Ologie that we put out in the marketplace in the past few years have resonated. People are playing that back to us.
That's fantastic.
They are agreeing that that is in fact what RIT stands for, not at the expense of our legacy messages, I might add. So when we ask about co-op and outcomes and careers, those are very strong. But now they also know us for creativity and innovation. They also know us for the intersection of technology, the arts, and design. Those were things that we were not talking about prior to 2017. But now 1 in 2 parents agree with that statement, and 69% of undergrad prospects recall seeing ads about creativity and innovation.
That's fantastic.
So it's great to be able to get these marketing KPIs, and then what I would say are downstream indicators like admissions, advancement. Those metrics are also very positive. So we know that we're not only affecting the top of the funnel, but really there's impact all the way through.
That's great. If you were going to give advice to anybody who was going to go through a rebranding exercise, now that you've been through it and the length of the journey, what would you say to them? Don't do it?
No, I would definitely not say that.
Okay.
Especially that this is my second time doing a rebrand. We did the first time at Purdue, again with Ologie, second time in my career at least. I know Ologie, that's a lot of what they do. And I'm sure Bill has a lot more advice to share than I do. But I would say that there's a time to be patient and solicit input and feedback and get buy-in. And there's a time to say, okay, this is what the data is showing. here's a little bit of an FYI.
Yeah.
And we are moving forward. So I think just being very understanding of your institutional culture, where do you need those points of those critical junctures where you really need that input
Yeah.
and direction, and where you just need to educate. I think that is going to be key to kind of navigate at any institution. And so it was different when we did it at Purdue. The size was amazingly large, and the alumni base is so massive and global. RIT had its own different stakeholders who were passionate about different things, and making sure that we were being very intentional about the process.
Yeah.
I don't know, Bill, what advice would you have for rebrands?
It might seem a little unconventional, but I would say when it's done, keep going.
Yeah.
Because the idea of rebrand is probably not healthy anyway.
Yeah,
you know,
yeah.
And it's a higher ed thing that I've
Yeah.
learned, that a lot of schools kind of neglect their brand over time. I mean, you know, RIT's great now, but Kin was the second true marketing hire, right?
Yeah.
So if you manage the brand aggressively, you don't have to rebrand. You evolve it every single day. And I kind of want our branding business to go out of business so that we can focus on marketing and you know, driving results. But I mean, don't get me wrong, it's cool and it's fun, but I'd love more schools to just sort of undertake brand management.
Yeah. How important is the relationship with your agency? And actually, you know, the confidence, the trust. You guys have a great chemistry when you're presenting. It was like you could see that you were really bought into this project, that you had a passion for it. But how important is that?
Yeah,
the
I mean,
partnership?
I've maintained this throughout. We work with partners. Ologie is our partner. I mean, they're not physically located at RIT, but they care and cared as much about our success as they did about anything else. So you felt that, and I felt that when I worked with them at Purdue, and that's why I engaged them again when we worked at RIT. It is absolutely crucial. It's not just a project. It's how do we make this successful? How do we make sure they were there to bounce ideas off of that maybe weren't even in scope. And you know, that's not what you want, is these defined parameters and be like, okay, yeah, is that what yeah, hey, listen, this is what is going on with this particular area. And it's like, you know, you can talk to Bill and you can talk to Bev or anybody on that team about that, because they are invested in your success. So I would say we couldn't have done it without their help for sure. And the partnership being the key operative word.
That's great. Well, guys, thanks for sharing your story. Thanks for sharing the journey. Hopefully see you at CUPRAP next year. And I look forward to seeing the brand evolve over the next couple of years.